My name is Betty W. Rudy. I am 34 years old, and the night my boyfriend told me his cheating was my fault because I worked too much, I said, "You're right," and then I proved what my time and effort had built. I work in commercial operations management for a regional logistics company outside Denver, and I live on structure because structure is how you build a future that doesn't collapse the first time someone gets bored. Most of my days start before sunrise and end late, and I don't apologize for that because deadlines don't care about feelings, and neither do the bills. My boyfriend was Leon. He is 29, and we were together a little over 3 years. We didn't live together full time, but we shared responsibilities, keys, routines, and a very merged life on paper. People always asked why I work so much, like it was a personality defect. The honest answer is simple. I was building something specific and measurable. I was promoted twice in 5 years. I managed teams. I managed budgets. I oversaw contracts that paid for everything Leon enjoyed without ever touching his own savings. I didn't work late because I wanted to escape him. I worked late because the future doesn't build itself. At the beginning, Leon loved that about me. He bragged about it to his friends, ambitious, driven, stable, his words. He liked saying he felt safe with me. He liked that I planned trips months ahead. He liked that when something broke, I replaced it instead of talking about it for weeks. Over time, that admiration turned into something else. Little comments at first about me never being around enough, about how I always chose work over fun. He started framing my schedule as a flaw instead of a shared investment. Every disagreement came back to the same accusation: you care more about work than me. I corrected him the first time, then the second. After that, I stopped engaging in circular arguments. I adjusted where I could cut a few late nights, took more days off, but the complaints got sharper, not softer. He didn't want balance, he wanted leverage. The night everything cracked didn't start dramatic. It was a Wednesday. I came home later than planned, and he was already irritated. Arms crossed, tone clipped like he had been practicing. He told me he had been thinking a lot and had realized something important about himself. And that was when he said it calmly, like a conclusion he had already reached without me. He said my long hours pushed him to cheat, and it was my fault. I didn't interrupt him. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at him and nodded. "You're right," I said, and that single sentence changed the next 24 hours in ways he didn't see coming. When I said "you're right," Leon smiled. Not relief, satisfaction, the kind that comes when someone thinks they have finally won an argument that has been running in their head for months. He relaxed instantly, like the conversation was over, and the verdict went his way. He started explaining himself again, but louder now, more confident. He told me he felt neglected, that he deserved attention, that any man would have done the same thing in his position. He framed the cheating like a weather event, unfortunate, unavoidable, basically my fault for leaving the window open. I let him talk. I didn't defend myself. I didn't ask who it was or how long it had been going on. That seemed to confuse him at first. He kept checking my face, waiting for anger or begging or panic. None came. I agreed with him again. I said if my time and effort were the problem, then removing them made sense. That was when he laughed, actually laughed, and said I was finally being mature about it, and that maybe this could make us stronger if I learned my lesson. He misunderstood the direction of the conversation entirely. I told him I needed to step out for a bit to clear my head, and he waved me off like I was running an errand and told me to grab food on the way back because he had a long day and didn't feel like cooking. While he sat on the couch, scrolling his phone, smiling, probably at the same person he blamed me for, I left and started making calls, not emotional ones, administrative ones, the kind you make when you are dismantling a structure instead of arguing inside it. I drove to a quiet parking lot a few blocks away and sat there with the engine off and the heat running low because my hands were cold, not from sadness, from focus. When you live the kind of life I live, you learn that emotions pass, but decisions remain. And if someone is bold enough to tell you their betrayal is your fault, the only logical response is to remove the system they are blaming. I pulled out my phone and started making calls the same way I would handle a vendor issue or a contract adjustment, calm, direct, no drama. The first call was the leasing office for the apartment. The lease was in my name. The payments came from my account. Leon lived there with the kind of comfort that makes a person forget whose effort built the floor under their feet. I confirmed the early termination clause and paid it. It was expensive, but it was clean. I asked for written confirmation and a move-out timeline. Keys surrendered by end of day tomorrow. Parking access revoked immediately. I authorized everything and received the email while I was still on the phone. The second call was the storage facility. I had been paying for that unit for years because work required travel, and sometimes you need a place to put things when life is moving fast. Leon used it more than I did. He stored boxes there like the unit was an extension of his closet. I removed his access code. I asked them to note that any retrieval of items would require my presence and ID. The manager didn't ask questions. They just did it because policies exist for a reason. The third call was my insurance provider. Leon's car was on my policy, not because he couldn't get his own insurance, because it was cheaper bundled, and because we were building a life together, or at least that's what I thought. I removed his vehicle from my policy. Coverage ended at 12:01 p.m. the next day. Liability matters. If you are going to detach, you detach fully. Separate car, separate problem. Each call took minutes. Years of shared assumptions unraveled in less than an hour. I didn't do it to punish him. I did it because systems run on responsibility, and I wasn't going to carry responsibility for someone who just told me I deserved betrayal. Then I drove back like nothing happened, and I stopped for food like he asked, because I wanted one more thing to be true. I wanted to see how normal he could act while the ground under him had already shifted. When I walked in, he barely looked up. He was texting and smiling, comfortable, certain, and that certainty made my stomach turn because it meant he believed my effort belonged to him no matter what he did. That night he went to bed like the future was still intact. I slept fine, not out of relief, out of clarity. Once the decision is made, the body stops arguing with itself. The next morning I left early as usual. Leon was still asleep. I didn't wake him. Deadlines matter more than speeches, and I had work to do that day, both at the office and in my life. At work, I handled meetings like normal. I signed off on a vendor contract, reviewed a quarterly forecast, approved overtime for 2 supervisors. From the outside, nothing had changed. Internally, I was just executing. Around noon, the leasing office called back to confirm the unit move-out timeline. Keys surrendered by end of day. Parking access revoked immediately. I authorized it again and forwarded the confirmation emails to a personal folder titled Done. At 2 p.m., my insurance app confirmed the vehicle removal. Coverage ended. That mattered. At 3 p.m., the storage facility emailed confirmation that Leon's access code had been disabled and that any retrieval would require me. Also important. Then I left work at my normal time. No rushing, no drama, no announcement. I wasn't angry. I was finished. When I pulled into the apartment complex, I saw Leon's car still there, in the same spot like a bookmark in a story he assumed was still being written in his favor. He was on the couch when I walked in and immediately asked why I hadn't texted all day. He said communication mattered if we were going to fix things. I agreed calmly and told him he needed to pack what he needed for the night. He laughed like it was some boundary exercise. He asked if this was the kind of thing a therapist would recommend. I handed him my phone with the leasing email open. He read it once, then again, then a third time. His face changed slowly like the words were in a foreign language. "What does this mean?" he asked. "It means the apartment is gone," I said. "Tonight." He stood up fast. "Where am I supposed to go?" That question made me realize how completely he had trained himself to see me. Not as a partner, but as infrastructure. I told him that was no longer something I managed. That was when the panic started. Raised voice accusations, said I was overreacting, said people cheat all the time, said I couldn't do this without discussing it. I reminded him he already discussed it. He told me why he cheated. He told me it was my fault. I accepted his premise and removed the cause. Consequences have follow-through. He accused me of trying to scare him, said this was manipulative, said normal couples talk things through. I told him normal couples don't assign fault for cheating and then expect logistics to remain unchanged. He demanded I reverse it. He said he would call the leasing office himself. I told him he could try, but the lease was terminated and the payment was processed. Final means final. His phone started vibrating while he argued. Alerts. He ignored them at first because he was still focused on controlling the conversation. Then he looked down. Parking enforcement notice. Towing scheduled. Uninsured vehicle flagged. That was when his voice changed. He wasn't angry anymore. He was afraid. He sat back down like his legs stopped working. He stared at his phone, refreshing the screen like panic could rewrite reality if he watched hard enough. It didn't. He asked if I was trying to ruin him. I told him I wasn't trying to do anything to him. I was removing myself from him. Then he cried, loud and sudden. He said he had nowhere to go. He said his friends were busy. He reminded me of everything he had put up with, my hours, my stress, my absence. I let him finish. Then I told him he framed cheating as a consequence, not a mistake. Consequences have follow-through, and this was mine. He asked about his car. I told him it was no longer insured under my name and it could not stay in the garage. I suggested he move it immediately or arrange a tow himself. I was not paying fines for his convenience. He yelled that I was cruel, that I was punishing him instead of fixing things. I told him fixing things requires trust, not blame, shifting. By 8 p.m., he was on the phone with his sister pacing the living room. Whisper, yelling, repeating how unfair this was, how he didn't see it coming. That part almost made me smile. He saw it coming. He just assumed it wouldn't apply to him. At 9 p.m., a tow truck pulled into the lot and Leon ran to the window. Panic replaced anger instantly. He grabbed his keys and ran downstairs barefoot without even putting on a jacket. I stayed inside. From the balcony, I watched him argue with the tow driver, gesturing wildly, pointing at his phone, calling someone else for backup. The driver stood there unmoved, tapping at his tablet and waiting. Systems do not argue, they execute. I could see the moment it hit him, when he realized this wasn't a bluff, when he understood that insurance records and garage access weren't emotional threats, they were procedural consequences. He paced in circles beside the car like panic might rewind time. It didn't. Within minutes, the car was lifted, secured, and driven away. Leon stood there staring at the empty space as if something invisible had been taken too. When he came back upstairs, he was shaking. The anger was gone. The arrogance was gone. He asked if he could stay one more night. He said he would figure everything out in the morning. I told him no. I handed him a small bag I had packed earlier. Essentials only. Clothes, toiletries. Nothing sentimental. I opened the door and waited. He stood there for a long time before stepping into the hallway. He didn't slam the door. He didn't shout. He just looked at me like he was trying to reconcile the version of me he thought he knew with the one standing in front of him. Then he walked away. That was the last night he slept under a roof my time and effort paid for. The next morning was quiet. Not heavy, not tense. Quiet in the way a room feels after something noisy has been removed. At 7 a.m., I received confirmation that the apartment access codes had been fully disabled. At 7:12, the building emailed that the unit would be inspected that afternoon. At 7:30, my bank confirmed the final lease payment had cleared. Everything was closed. Nothing pending. At 8:04, Leon texted, "Where am I supposed to go now?" I did not reply. At 9:10, he called. I declined it. At 9:12, he called again. I muted the thread. Emergencies get answered. Guilt does not. Around noon, his friend Maya called me. Loud opinions. Always had advice when things were good and panic when things were real. She told me Leon was spiraling. That he had no car. That he was couch surfing. That I was being extreme. She said relationships are about forgiveness. I told her forgiveness does not require continued access to assets. Then I ended the call. By mid-afternoon, the leasing office sent photos of the apartment. Empty rooms, clean counters. No trace of him except faint outlines where furniture had been. It looked exactly like it did before he moved in. That symmetry felt intentional. At 4 p.m., Leon finally sent a longer message. Paragraphs. Apologies mixed with blame. He said he didn't mean it like that. That he only cheated once. That he never thought I would actually leave. That was the line that mattered. He never thought I would actually leave. That told me everything about how he saw me. Not as a partner, as infrastructure. I replied once, "You said my time and effort pushed you to cheat. I removed them. This is the result." He responded instantly. Panic again. Promises. Therapy. Boundaries. Transparency. Whatever I wanted. What I wanted already existed. It was called peace. Less than 24 hours after telling me the cheating was my fault, he no longer had an apartment, a car, or a financial safety net tied to my name. And he still thought this was a phase. It was not. By the second morning, his messages shifted from apology to bargaining, temporary separation, joint counseling, staying friends until things cooled down. He even suggested we keep things quiet so people wouldn't get the wrong idea. That was when I understood blocking him was necessary. Not for drama, for containment. When someone believes access to you is negotiable, they will keep negotiating forever. They will use emotion, urgency, history, guilt. The only way to end it cleanly is to remove the channel entirely. At lunch, I saved the messages that mattered. Facts beat nostalgia every time. Then I blocked his number, his email, every shared social platform. I removed him from cloud access. Shared calendars gone. Location sharing off. Emergency contact replaced. The silence afterward was immediate and total. No typing bubbles, no frantic follow-ups slipping through cracks. Just quiet. It felt settled. An hour later, I got a message request from his sister asking why I was ignoring Leon and saying he was panicking. I blocked that too. That evening, I cooked dinner, ate at the table instead of the couch, cleaned up afterward. Normal things, grounding things. For the first time in a long while, my apartment felt like my space again. But blocking him did not end the noise. It just redirected it. By the next morning, the pressure shifted sideways instead of forward. 3 emails arrived from unfamiliar addresses, different names, same tone, confused, emotional, long explanations about misunderstanding and how people deserve grace. I did not open them. I deleted them and tightened my filters. If someone wants reconciliation, they speak directly and clearly. Anonymous emotion is not reconciliation. It is strategy. Then it moved offline. A coworker pulled me aside and asked quietly if everything was okay. Someone had commented on one of my older photos asking if I was heartless. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Later that night, a mutual acquaintance sent screenshots. Leon had written a long post about emotional abandonment and financial control. He never used my name, but the details were close enough for anyone who knew us to fill in the blanks. I didn't react publicly. I forwarded the screenshots to my attorney and asked a simple question about documentation and liability. He responded calmly the next morning, reassuring and clear. No threats were needed. 2 days later, the post disappeared. That told me everything. The narrative had crossed from emotional to risky. Once facts are involved, performative outrage fades quickly. But Leon wasn't done. 2 nights later, the concierge emailed me. Someone had attempted to access the garage, claiming there had been a mistake. Claimed they still live there. Access denied. Incident logged. I replied and asked them to preserve the footage. When someone believes they are entitled to your infrastructure, they test every door. The next afternoon, I saw him from my window, standing in the lobby, waiting. He didn't look angry. He looked disoriented, smaller, like someone who assumed the world would bend if he pushed hard enough and was confused when it didn't. He stayed nearly an hour. No one called me. No one let him up. Eventually, he left. Later that evening, my bank sent a notification, a failed subscription charge, something I forgot to cancel. Declined. Account closed. One by one, the assumptions he relied on stopped responding. The next shift came not from anger, but from practicality. A friend of his reached out asking logistical questions. Where was the car? Why wasn't the insurance active? Why wouldn't the storage facility release his belongings? The tone wasn't accusatory anymore. It was confused. I answered once, brief, factual. He no longer has access to assets in my name. That answer traveled. By the end of the week, the outrage had softened into realization. People began connecting the dots without my involvement. The narrative wasn't dramatic anymore. It was procedural. Leon tried one last angle. He sent a message through someone else asking for a supervised pickup time for the storage unit. I approved one 30-minute window. Inventory logged. No extended access. He didn't show. Instead, another message arrived saying everything was moving too fast and he was overwhelmed. Nothing about this was fast. It was decisive. A few days later, I learned why he didn't show up. The car was still impounded. Fees stacking. Registration expired. No insurance meant no release without proof. Proof he didn't have. Systems do not respond to feelings. They respond to compliance. That week, I told my parents what happened. Not the emotional version. The structural one. My father nodded once and said, "You handled it clean." My mother asked if I was sleeping well. I was. The following Sunday, I went for a long run before sunrise. The air was cold and clear. No missed calls, no notifications, no emotional negotiations waiting when I got home. For the first time in years, my time belonged fully to me. Leon's circle began to shift too. I heard through someone else that he had been missing work, that his story didn't line up anymore, that he had described me as controlling but couldn't explain why every system was documented and every agreement was mutual. When resources disappear, patterns become visible. A week later, he finally retrieved his belongings from storage during the approved window. No confrontation, no speech, just boxes and signatures. After that, nothing. No dramatic apology, no revenge, no final scene. Just absence. Months passed. People occasionally ask if I regret not talking it out more, if I could have been softer, if it was too extreme. I always answer the same way. He told me my effort caused his betrayal. I accepted his premise and removed the effort. That is not cruelty. That is alignment. Responsibility without authority is just blame, and I do not operate inside systems like that. The quiet that followed was not empty. It was structured, predictable, mine. I didn't win anything. I reclaimed it.